The dry dock saved her. That is the simple truth of December 7th, 1941. While Arizona burned and Oklahoma capsized and West Virginia settled into the mud, USS Pennsylvania sat high and dry in dry dock number 1 with 3 of her 4 propellers removed and her fate already sealed by an accident of timing. The flagship of the United States fleet, the ship that should have been the primary target, the vessel that carried admirals and embodied American naval power in the Pacific, survived because she was out of the water getting fixed. The Japanese missed her, but missing her was the biggest mistake they made that morning. At 07:55 hours on December 7th, 1941, Pennsylvania sits in dry dock number 1 at the Pearl Harbor Navy Yard. Her standard displacement, 29,158 long tons. Full load displacement, 31,917 long tons. Overall length, 608 feet. Beam, 97 feet at the waterline. Draft at deep load, 29 feet 3 inches. Main armament, 12 14-inch 45 caliber guns and 4 triple turrets. 2 forward. Designated Turret 1 and Turret 2. 2 aft. Designated Turret 3 and Turret 4. Secondary armament, 22 5-inch 51 caliber guns and casemates. 12 5-inch 25 caliber anti-aircraft guns. 4 3-inch 50 caliber anti-aircraft guns. Complement, 1,358 officers and enlisted men. 3 propeller shafts lie on the dry dock floor. The 4th remains attached, but the ship cannot move. The destroyers Cassin and Downs share the dry dock ahead of Pennsylvania, positioned bow to stern in the confined space. The cruiser Helena with the minelayer Oglala alongside occupies berth B2, Pennsylvania's normal berth, directly astern of the dry dock. Across the channel, Battleship Row stretches along the southeast shore of Ford Island, California in berth F3, Maryland inboard with Oklahoma outboard in berth F5, Tennessee inboard with West Virginia outboard in berth F6, Arizona in berth F7, Nevada in berth F8. Pennsylvania has been excused from anti-aircraft drills while in dry dock. No drills are scheduled for Sunday. Machine guns in the foremast are manned. A condition watch of anti-aircraft personnel is available on board, but not on guns. Captain Charles Mason Cook Jr. commands. He is aboard. The first lieutenant is aboard. Department representatives from each department are aboard. The executive officer, Commander Paul Heinemann, is at his station. At 07:58 hours, the first Japanese aircraft appear over Ford Island. High-altitude horizontal bombers, Nakajima B-5N, Kate torpedo bombers modified for level bombing, Aichi D-3 Aval dive bombers, Mitsubishi A-6M0 fighters providing escort and strafing runs. The attack plan, developed by Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, designates battleships as primary targets: Arizona, California, Maryland, Nevada, Oklahoma, Tennessee, West Virginia. Pennsylvania is not on the list. She is in dry dock. She is inaccessible to torpedoes. She is a secondary target at best, but Pennsylvania's crew does not wait for orders. At 0802 hours, Pennsylvania's anti-aircraft gunners begin engaging hostile aircraft. They are among the first guns in Pearl Harbor to open fire. The ship is immobilized, but her weapons function. Crews rush ammunition from ready lockers. The 3-inch guns track targets. The 5-inch guns engage at maximum elevation. The machine guns fire on any aircraft within range. The torpedo bombers concentrate on Battleship Row. Oklahoma takes 3 torpedoes by 0800 hours. She begins capsizing. Arizona takes a torpedo forward. California takes 2 torpedoes. West Virginia takes multiple torpedoes. Nevada, moored alone in berth F8, takes 1 torpedo to port. The battleships are the target. The dry dock is an afterthought. At 0830 hours, dive bombers attack the dry dock. 1 bomb hits destroyer Downs directly. The explosion penetrates to the engineering spaces. Fire spreads immediately. Fuel oil ignites. The destroyer begins burning. A 2nd bomb hits destroyer Cassin. Similar effect. Fire and fuel oil. Both destroyers are quickly engulfed. Pennsylvania's anti-aircraft batteries continue firing. About 5 high bombing attacks pass over Pennsylvania between 0830 and 0915 hours. Nakajima B-5N bombers in V formation. 4 to 6 planes per formation. Altitude estimated 10,000 to 12,000 feet. The formations maintain straight course. The first attack from ahead and passing to starboard bombs the battleships across the channel. The second attack from slightly on the port bow drops bombs on the ships in the dry dock. One heavy bomb hits destroyer Downs in the dock ahead of Pennsylvania. One bomb hits the dock approximately abreast frame 20, starboard of Pennsylvania. One bomb hits Pennsylvania. The bomb destroys a 5-inch gun mount completely. The entire gun crew dies instantly. 15 men. The bomb also hits the boat deck on the starboard side, causing considerable damage. A second bomb that produces significant damage strikes near frame 20, between 0830 and 0900 hours. A dive bombing attack approaches Pennsylvania on the port bow. 10 to 15 planes in succession at low altitude. The attack is directed at Pennsylvania and the two destroyers. Pennsylvania's anti-aircraft batteries take the attacking planes under heavy fire. Just before reaching Pennsylvania, approximately 2/3 of the attacking planes swerve left toward Nevada. Nevada has gotten underway. She is attempting to escape the harbor. Multiple bombs hit Nevada. She stops approximately 600 yards from Pennsylvania's starboard quarter. At 0920 hours, both destroyers in the dry dock are fully involved in fire. The flames spread to Pennsylvania. The dry dock is flooded to help contain the fire. This is a desperate measure. Flooding the dry dock extinguishes some fires, but creates new problems. Pennsylvania's damaged areas are now below the rising waterline. Damage control parties work frantically to shore up damaged compartments and prevent flooding of the ship itself. At 0930 hours, the destroyers begin exploding. Ammunition magazines detonate. At 0941 hours, Downs is shattered by an explosion that scatters debris across the entire dry dock area. One of her torpedo tubes, a Mark 15 Mod 021-inch torpedo tube weighing between 500 and 1,000 pounds, is launched into the air by the explosion. The tube strikes Pennsylvania's forecastle. It punches through deck plating and embeds itself in the forward part of the ship. Part of Pennsylvania's crew battles the fire in the bowl. Other crew members use the ship's boats to ferry anti-aircraft ammunition from stores in the west lock of Pearl Harbor. The attack continues. Japanese aircraft remain over Pearl Harbor through 0945 hours. Pennsylvania's guns fire continuously. Ammunition expenditure is significant. The exact count is not recorded in the chaos, but post-attack assessment indicates hundreds of rounds fired from all anti-aircraft weapons. By 1000 hours, the attack ends. The Japanese aircraft withdraw. The sky clears. The harbor burns. Pennsylvania remains afloat in the dry dock. Cassin is capsized against Downs. Both destroyers are total losses. Pennsylvania has 15 men killed, including Commander Heinemann. The executive officer, 14 men are missing, presumed killed in the fires or explosions. 38 men are wounded. The damage to Pennsylvania is assessed as light compared to the battleships on Battleship Row. Oklahoma has capsized completely. Arizona has exploded and sunk. West Virginia has settled to the bottom. California is sinking. Tennessee and Maryland are trapped by the sunken ships alongside them. Nevada is beached to prevent her from sinking in the channel. Pennsylvania is damaged but salvageable. She is afloat. Her machinery is intact. Her main battery is intact. She can be repaired. On December 12, 1941, 5 days after the attack, Pennsylvania is refloated and moved out of dry dock number 1. Temporary repairs are effected immediately. A 5-inch 25 caliber gun and a 5-inch 51 caliber casemate gun are removed from the damaged battleship West Virginia and installed on Pennsylvania to replace weapons damaged in the attack. On December 20th, 13 days after the attack, Pennsylvania departs Pearl Harbor. She arrives in San Francisco on December 29th. She enters dry dock at Hunters Point on January 1st, 1942. The repairs last 12 days. This is remarkably fast. Most Pearl Harbor casualties require months of repair. Oklahoma will not be refloated until 1943. California requires 18 months of work. West Virginia returns to service in September 1944. Arizona is never repaired. Pennsylvania leaves Hunters Point on January 20th, 1942, ready for sea. The decision is made immediately. Pennsylvania will not join the battle line. She is too old, too slow, too vulnerable for fleet actions. Her design speed, 21 knots. Her actual speed after 30 years of service in the Pearl Harbor damage, closer to 20 knots. The new fast battleships, the North Carolina class and the South Dakota class, make 27 knots. The Iowa class, now under construction, will make 33 knots. Pennsylvania cannot keep pace. She cannot protect the carriers. She cannot engage Japanese fast battleships, but she has 12 14-inch guns, Each gun can fire a 1,560-pound armor-piercing shell to maximum range of 23,600 yards at 15-degree elevation. After modernization in the 1930s, elevation increased to 30 degrees, extending maximum range to 34,600 yards. Rate of fire, 1.5 rounds per minute. Magazine capacity, 100 rounds per gun. Total capacity, 1,200 rounds of 14-inch ammunition. This firepower makes her valuable for shore bombardment. The Pacific War will be an amphibious war. Every island requires softening before the Marines land. Every beach requires preparation. Every Japanese fortification must be destroyed before American troops can advance. Pennsylvania can provide this firepower. She becomes a bombardment ship. From January through April 1942, Pennsylvania conducts gunnery training off California. The training is intensive. Fire control drills, main battery accuracy drills, secondary battery drills, simulated shore bombardment. The crew practices the techniques they will use for the next 3 years. How to spot fall of shot against land targets. How to adjust fire based on spotter aircraft reports. How to maintain sustained fire rates without overheating gun barrels. How to coordinate with Marine shore fire control parties. In June 1942, Admiral Ernest Joseph King, Commander-in-Chief of the United States Fleet, holds ceremonies aboard Pennsylvania to present the Distinguished Service Medal to Admiral Chester William Nimitz for exceptionally meritorious service as Commander-in-Chief of the United States Pacific Fleet since December 31, 1941. Pennsylvania serves as the ceremonial flagship. This is appropriate. She was the flagship when the war began. She carries the honor of that position, even though faster. Newer ships now carry admirals into combat. Pennsylvania misses the Battle of Midway in June 1942. She is designated part of Task Force 1, but remains in San Francisco. The battle is fought by carriers. The battleships assigned to protect Midway never engage. Pennsylvania's absence makes no difference to the outcome. From August through October 1942, Pennsylvania operates from Pearl Harbor. Gunnery exercises, carrier task force guard tactics, more training. The Pacific offensive is beginning, but Pennsylvania is not yet needed. The Guadalcanal campaign uses cruisers and destroyers for night surface actions. Carriers provide air support. The old battleships wait. From October 1942 through February 1943, Pennsylvania undergoes extensive overhaul at San Francisco. The work transforms her anti-aircraft capability. The overhaul installs 10 Bofors 40mm quadruple mounts, 51 Oerlikon 20mm single mounts, new radar systems, improved fire control equipment. The transformation is dramatic. Pennsylvania enters the yard with inadequate anti-aircraft defenses. She emerges as one of the most heavily armed anti-aircraft platforms in the fleet. The Bofor's 40mm gun fires a 2-pound high explosive shell at a rate of 120 rounds per minute per barrel, 4 barrels per mount, 10 mounts, 4,800 rounds per minute combined rate of fire from the 40mm battery. Effective range, 4,500 yards against aircraft. The Oerlikon 20mm gun fires a quarter-pound shell at 450 rounds per minute, 51 mounts, 22,950 rounds per minute combined. Effective range, 1,500 yards. The combined weight of fire from Pennsylvania's anti-aircraft battery exceeds any previous American battleship design. In April 1943, Pennsylvania sails for Alaska. The Aleutian Campaign requires naval gunfire support. Japanese forces occupy Attu and Kiska in the Aleutian Islands chain. The United States plans amphibious assaults to retake both islands. Pennsylvania provides the heavy bombardment. On April 30th, 1943, Pennsylvania arrives at Cold Bay, Alaska. The weather is appalling. Heavy fog covers the area. Visibility near zero. Approach to the target must be made entirely by radar. The bombardment must be conducted by radar and indirect fire methods. Land is never sighted. On May 11th and 12th, 1943, Pennsylvania bombards Holtz Bay and Chichagof Harbor on Attu. The first bombardment mission begins at 15:14 hours on May 11th. Heavy fog. The starboard secondary battery opens fire at range of approximately 9,000 yards. 672 5-inch armor-piercing common shells set for both air and ground bursts are expended. No observation of fall of shot. The fire is entirely radar-directed. The second bombardment mission on May 12th uses both main and secondary batteries simultaneously. A shore fire control party spots the fall of shot after the fog lifts. The bombardment is effective. Japanese positions in the target area are neutralized. On May 14th, Pennsylvania bombards Holt's Bay again in support of an infantry attack. This time visibility allows visual bearings for approach and first leg of the firing run. Then fog returns. The ship maneuvers in a restricted area entirely by radar for over 2 hours. Main and secondary batteries fire indirect fire at designated target areas. American infantry is 500 yards to the right of the impact area. Scout troops are 1,500 yards beyond. The fire must be precise. Pennsylvania's radar fire control and the shore fire control party coordination achieve the necessary accuracy. No friendly casualties from naval gunfire. The bombardment materially weakens enemy resistance. American ground forces advance and occupy the area. On August 15, 1943, assault troops land on Kiska. No opposition. By evening of August 16, it is apparent the Japanese evacuated the island under cover of fog. Pennsylvania's presence ensured the landing could proceed regardless of enemy resistance. The Aleutian Campaign establishes Pennsylvania's role. She is the bombardment specialist, the ship that can put shells precisely on target in any weather condition, the ship with enough ammunition capacity to sustain fire for hours, the ship willing to close to short range when necessary and equipped with enough anti-aircraft firepower to defend herself against air attack. In November 1943, Pennsylvania participates in the assault on Macon Atoll in the Gilbert Islands. She departs Pearl Harbor on November 10th as flagship for Rear Admiral Richmond Kelly Turner, Commander 5th Amphibious Force. The task force includes 4 battleships, 4 cruisers, 3 escort carriers, transports, and destroyers. On November 20th, 1943, Pennsylvania opens fire on Budaratari Island at initial range of 14,200 yards. She unleashes both main and secondary batteries. The bombardment continues for several hours. Japanese coast defense guns return fire. Their shells fall short. Pennsylvania's armor protection, designed to resist 8-inch shells at battle ranges, is proof against the smaller Japanese guns at this distance. Pennsylvania suffers no damage. From January through February 1944, Pennsylvania bombards Kwajalein Island in the Marshall Islands. She fires from January 31st through February 3rd. Then she retires to Majuro Atoll for ammunition replenishment. On February 17th, she sails close to shore at Engebe Island and opens fire. The bombardment destroys Japanese defensive structures. American forces land on Eniwetok the next day. Pennsylvania provides naval gunfire support through February 22nd, bombarding Engebe and Parry Islands to support ground forces. The pattern is established. Pennsylvania arrives at the target. She bombards from long range to suppress coast defense guns. She closes range as resistance weakens. She provides call fire support for troops ashore. She expends ammunition until magazines run low. She retires to replenish. She returns and continues bombardment. The cycle repeats. In June and July 1944, Pennsylvania participates in the Marianas Campaign. Saipan, Tinian, Guam. Each operation follows the template. On June 14th, Pennsylvania bombards Saipan preparatory to the assault landings. While cruising off the northeastern shore of Tinian, she conducts heavy bombardment to neutralize enemy batteries that might fire on Saipan's landing beaches. On June 16th, she bombards targets on Orote Point, Guam, then returns to cover the Saipan area. Pennsylvania departs the Marianas on June 25th. Brief stay at Eniwetok. Returns July 9th to resume support. From July 12th through July 14th, Pennsylvania bombards Guam in preparation for the assault. On completion of firing the evening of July 14th, she returns to Saipan to replenish ammunition. She fired her magazines nearly dry. Over 1,000 rounds of 14-inch, thousands of rounds of 5-inch. The guns are hot. The crews are exhausted. The ammunition ships pump shells back into her magazines, and she returns. On July 17th, Pennsylvania returns to Guam. She delivers protective fire support to demolition parties, clearing obstacles from the landing beaches. The demolition teams work under direct observation of Japanese positions. Pennsylvania's guns keep the Japanese suppressed. If a position fires on the demolition teams, Pennsylvania's spotters identify it and the main battery destroys it. This continues for days. On the early morning of July 21st, Pennsylvania takes position between Agate Beach and Orote Peninsula. She commences bombardment of beach areas in immediate preparation for the assault. Troops and equipment load into landing craft. Landing waves form. Pennsylvania fires continuously when the beachhead is established. She stands by for fire support missions as called by shore fire control parties. This duty continues until August 3rd. During the Guam campaign, Pennsylvania fires more ammunition than any other warship in history during a single campaign. The exact total is not officially recorded, but estimates based on ammunition consumption reports exceed 2,000 rounds of 14-inch shells. The secondary battery expenditure exceeds 10,000 rounds of 5-inch. The ship earns the nickname Old Falling Apart because empty shell casings pile up on deck faster than crews can jettison them. The ship appears to be disintegrating from the volume of fire. The guns show the strain. Barrel wear becomes severe. Accuracy degrades. After Guam, Pennsylvania requires barrel replacement. The Navy faces a problem. Replacement barrels for 14-inch 45 caliber guns are in short supply. New construction priority goes to fast battleships. The solution is ingenious and morbid. Remove guns from ships that will never fire again. In September 1944, Pennsylvania participates in the Palau Islands campaign. Peleliu and Angora. She bombards from September 12th through September 14th. Landings occur on September 15th. She provides gunfire support for 3 days. Then she retires to Seidler Harbor on Manus in the Admiralty Islands for repairs. On October 12th, 1944, Pennsylvania leaves Seidler Harbor in company with battleships Mississippi, Tennessee, California, Maryland, and West Virginia under command of Rear Admiral Jesse Barrett Oldendorf. The destination is Leyte Gulf, the invasion of the Philippines. The return on October 18th, 1944. Pennsylvania enters Leyte Gulf as part of the Bombardment and Fire Support Group. Japanese air attacks begin immediately. Single dive bombers under cloud cover. Individual dives or glides on smaller combatant vessels or ships in the transport area. All attacks made under cloud cover. Majority undetected until the plane is in its dive or has dropped its bomb and pulled out. Pennsylvania's anti-aircraft batteries engage every target within range. The attacks continue for days. On October 24th, 1944, it becomes apparent that a major naval engagement is developing. Carrier search planes locate 2 Japanese forces, each composed of battleships, cruisers, and destroyers. One force, the Central Force, is in the Sibuyan Sea headed for San Bernardino Strait. The other force is approaching from the south through the Mindanao Sea headed for Surigao Strait. At 18:26 hours on October 24th, the 6 battleships form battle disposition and steam southward for Surigao Strait. West Virginia, Maryland, Mississippi, Tennessee, California, Pennsylvania. They steam slowly back and forth across the northern end of the strait, waiting. The Battle of Surigao Strait begins at 01:30 hours on October 25th, 1944. PT boats stationed well down in Surigao Strait encounter the oncoming enemy force. 2 Japanese battleships, 1 heavy cruiser, 4 destroyers. The PT boats attack with torpedoes. The Japanese force continues north. American destroyers on either flank attack with torpedoes and guns. The Japanese force continues north. At 03:25 hours, West Virginia opens fire. She is equipped with the latest Mark 8 fire control radar. She can engage targets at ranges exceeding 20,000 yards in total darkness. The other battleships follow: Tennessee, California, Maryland, Mississippi. Each ship fires when a radar acquires a target or when optical rangefinders get a solution. Pennsylvania never fires. Her fire control radar is obsolete. Mark 3 radar, installed during the 1942 to 1943 overhaul, cannot acquire targets at the extreme ranges where West Virginia and Tennessee are engaging. By the time Pennsylvania's radar could lock onto a target, the target no longer exists. West Virginia, Tennessee, and California destroy the Japanese battleship Yamashiro and cripple the heavy cruiser Mogami. The Japanese force turns and flees. Pennsylvania's gun crews stand by for 2 hours waiting for the order to commence firing. The order never comes. This is a fact that will be forever galling to the men aboard Pennsylvania that night. They participated in the last battle ever between battleships. They were present at the crossing of the T, the dream of every naval tactician. They manned their guns in record time. They waited, and they never fired a shot. The tactical lesson is clear. Radar fire control determines survival in night surface action. Ships without effective radar are blind. Ships with effective radar can engage before the enemy closes to visual range. Pennsylvania's Mark III radar is inadequate. She needs upgrading or she will remain useless in fleet actions. But Pennsylvania does not fight fleet actions. She bombards. And for bombardment, her equipment is adequate. Shore targets do not maneuver. Shore targets do not return radar-directed fire. Shore targets sit still and absorb shells until they are destroyed. On October 25th through November 25th, 1944, Pennsylvania remains in Leyte Gulf. Japanese air attacks continue. Kamikaze attacks begin. On November 23rd, a Yokosuka D-4Y Judy appears from behind a dark rain cloud at range of approximately 3,500 yards. Within 10 seconds, the plane is sighted, identified, and taken under effective anti-aircraft fire. The plane does not reach Pennsylvania. Crews of the anti-aircraft batteries stand watch and watch for 24 days and nights, followed by 14 nights of continuous alert. Air defense or general quarters is sounded 113 times. This figure does not include routine morning and evening general quarters. The strain on the crew is immense. Sleep deprivation, constant tension, the knowledge that a single kamikaze can destroy the ship. On November 25th, 1944, West Virginia relieves Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania departs Leyte Gulf. She was the first battleship to enter the Gulf and the last to leave. Over the course of January 4th through 5th, 1945, Japanese aircraft repeatedly attacked the Lingayen Gulf Invasion Force. Kamikazes destroy the escort carrier Omni Bay. Pennsylvania begins bombarding Japanese positions on Santiago Island at the entrance to Lingayen Gulf on January 6th. She enters the Gulf that night to suppress Japanese guns while minesweepers clear the area. The next morning, the rest of Oldendorf's ships join her to begin the main preparatory bombardment. The bombardment continues through January 8th. On January 9th, 1945, the amphibious assault begins. Troops from the 6th United States Army go ashore. Japanese aircraft strike the invasion fleet on January 10th. 4 bombs land close to Pennsylvania. She is undamaged. Later that day, a fire control party directs Pennsylvania to shell a group of Japanese tanks massing to launch a counterattack on the beachhead. Pennsylvania fires 12 14-inch rounds. The tanks are destroyed. This is Pennsylvania's last call fire mission of the war. It is fitting. Shore Fire Control Party identifies threat. Pennsylvania destroys threat. Infantry advances. The formula that worked at Attu, Kwajalein, Saipan, Guam, Peleliu works again at Lingayen. Pennsylvania has perfected the art of naval gunfire support. From January 10th through January 17th, Pennsylvania patrols the South China Sea off Lingayen Gulf with other ships of the task group. On January 17th, she anchors in Lingayen Gulf. On February 10th, she sails for temporary repairs at Manus. On February 22nd, she departs for Pearl Harbor and then San Francisco. She arrives March 13th, 1945, at Hunters Point. Pennsylvania receives a thorough overhaul. The main battery turrets and secondary battery mounts are re-gunned. The 14-inch guns are replaced with guns from USS Oklahoma. Oklahoma was refloated from Pearl Harbor but determined to be too damaged for repair. She will be scrapped. But her guns, removed before she capsized, are serviceable. They replace Pennsylvania's worn-out barrels. Additional close-range weapons are installed. New and improved radar and fire control equipment. The Mark VIII fire control radar that made West Virginia and Tennessee so deadly at Surigao Strait. Pennsylvania finally receives the equipment she needs. During the yard period, leave is granted to all hands. The first leave party, half the ship's company, leaves the ship by ferry before she proceeds into Hunters Point. Pennsylvania has set a record of which she can be proud. She is the only battleship to take part in every combat amphibious operation in the Pacific Ocean areas, and the 2 largest operations in the Southwest Pacific area from May 4th, 1943 to February 10th, 1945. 10 separate commands. Attu in the northern area. Lingayen in the Philippines. Everything in between. Pennsylvania completes 3 trial runs out of San Francisco. She spends 10 days in the San Clemente and San Diego area, executing every conceivable type of practice. She returns to San Francisco. 1 more trial run. On July 12th, 1945, she departs for Pearl Harbor. She arrives July 18th. Training period, July 20th through July 23rd. The training is cut short. Pennsylvania returns to Pearl Harbor on July 23rd and heads westward on July 24th, en route to Saipan. Pennsylvania makes a slight detour by way of Wake Island. Wake has been bypassed in the advance across the Pacific. Pennsylvania drops her calling card. The bombardment lasts from 0900 hours to 1500 hours. Japanese shore batteries return fire with due regard for the formalities. Pennsylvania silences the shore battery. The bombardment is accompanied by air attacks from the light carrier, Cabot. Pennsylvania expends ammunition, then steams to Saipan, replenishes, and continues to Okinawa on the morning of August 12, 1945. Pennsylvania enters Buckner Bay, Okinawa. She goes alongside Tennessee, which is at anchor, to receive Vice Admiral Oldendorf and his staff. The staff transfers. Pennsylvania casts off and proceeds to her own berth. At 20:45 hours, Pennsylvania lies quietly at anchor. A Japanese torpedo plane slips into Buckner Bay without warning. Single aircraft. Low altitude. No radar detection. No visual detection. The plane launches its torpedo at the indistinct silhouette of a large warship. The torpedo runs true. It strikes Pennsylvania well aft on the starboard side at 20:45 hours. The explosion is catastrophic. The torpedo creates a hole approximately 30 feet in diameter in the stern. The blast occurs in a living compartment. 19 men in the compartment die instantly from the force of the explosion. One additional man is killed elsewhere. 10 men are injured, including Vice Admiral Oldendorf. Many compartments flood. Pennsylvania settles heavily by the stern. The stern begins going under. Damage control parties rush to contain the flooding. Watertight doors are sealed. Counterflooding is initiated to prevent capsizing. Pumps are started. But the flooding continues. The stern continues sinking. 2 salvage tugs arrive promptly. They connect pumps and hoses. The combined efforts of the ship's repair parties and the tugs begin to control the flooding. But Pennsylvania is still sinking. The decision is made to tow her into shallower water. If the stern reaches bottom before she capsizes or founders completely, she can be saved. The tugs take her in tow. They move her toward shore. The stern touches bottom. The flooding is controlled. Pennsylvania survives. But it is close. Very close. Had the water been deeper, had the tugs arrived minutes later, had the damage control been less effective, Pennsylvania would have gone down. She would have been the only United States battleship sunk since Pearl Harbor. 3 of Pennsylvania's 4 propeller shafts are damaged or destroyed by the torpedo. Only 1 shaft remains operational. Pennsylvania can make headway on 1 shaft, but cannot return to the United States under her own power. Not safely, not reliably. Temporary repairs are necessary. On August 13, 1945, the night after the torpedo hit, Pennsylvania sees her last action of the war. An enemy suicide plane makes a run on ships in the harbor. It crashes in flames on the deck of a cargo ship approximately 1,000 yards off Pennsylvania's starboard beam. Pennsylvania's secondary battery tracks the plane by radar and fires 13 rounds. The 40mm battery fires 30 rounds. The plane crashes before reaching Pennsylvania. On August 18, 1945, Pennsylvania is towed out of Buckner Bay to Guam. She arrives September 6th. She enters the ABSD-3 floating dry dock. A large steel patch is welded over the torpedo hole. This patch will allow Pennsylvania to make the voyage back to the United States for permanent repairs. Battleship Missouri relieves Pennsylvania as flagship on September 15th. On October 2nd, Pennsylvania leaves the dry dock. On October 4th, she steams out of Guam bound for Puget Sound. Light cruiser Atlanta and destroyer Walkie provide escort. While en route on October 17th, Pennsylvania's No. 3 propeller shaft slips aft. The shaft, already damaged by the torpedo, cannot handle the strain of sustained operation. Divers go over the side. They cut the shaft loose. It falls to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Pennsylvania now has 1 operational screw. The open propeller shaft allows water to leak into the hull. She continues on 1 shaft with constant pumping required to control flooding. Pennsylvania arrives at Puget Sound on October 24, 1945. Shaft problems force her to enter Puget Sound with only 1 screw turning. She completes the journey nevertheless. The war is over. Japan surrendered on September 2nd. Pennsylvania's journey from Okinawa to Puget Sound is her last voyage under her own power. When the war ends, so does the need to make effective repairs. The Navy faces massive demobilization. The fleet is too large for peacetime. Budget constraints dominate planning. Pennsylvania is 30 years old. She is obsolete. Fast battleships make her irrelevant. Carriers make battleships themselves questionable. The question is not whether Pennsylvania will be scrapped, but when and how. On January 16, 1946, the Admiralty designates Pennsylvania to be expended as a target ship for Operation Crossroads atomic bomb tests at Bikini Atoll. The tests are scheduled for July 1946. Pennsylvania will be part of the target fleet. This decision is pragmatic. The torpedo damage makes her expensive to repair. The Navy needs target ships. Pennsylvania qualifies. Her service record is impressive but immaterial. She is expendable. Operation Crossroads consists of 2 nuclear tests. Test Able on July 1, 1946. Airburst detonation at 520 feet above the target fleet. Test Baker on July 25, 1946. Underwater detonation 90 feet below the surface. Each device yields 23 kilotons. The target fleet consists of 95 vessels, including battleships Pennsylvania, Nevada, New York, and Arkansas, aircraft carriers, Saratoga and Independence, cruisers, destroyers, submarines, auxiliary vessels, captured German and Japanese ships. The test planners position Pennsylvania in the outer ring of the target array. Ships in the outer ring are expected to survive both tests with repairable damage. The inner ring ships are expendable. Pennsylvania occupies target position 31. Range from surface 0 for Test Able. Approximately 1,800 yards. At 0900 hours on July 1, 1946, a Boeing B-29 Superfortress drops the Able device. The bomb detonates at 520 feet. The flash is visible for miles. The fireball expands. The shock wave radiates outward. 5 ships sink immediately. 2 attack transports, 2 destroyers, 1 Japanese cruiser. Pennsylvania survives. The blast damages her superstructure. Shock effects crack hull plating. Fires start, but she remains afloat. Radiation levels on Pennsylvania are high but not immediately lethal. Decontamination teams board the ship. They wash down the decks. They remove contaminated equipment. The work is dangerous. Radiation exposure accumulates. The teams rotate frequently to limit exposure. Test Baker on July 25 is more devastating. The underwater detonation creates a massive water column. 2 million tons of water erupt upward, forming a column approximately 6,000 feet high and 2,000 feet in diameter. The water collapses back into the lagoon. Radioactive spray falls on every ship in the target array. 8 ships sink. Aircraft carrier Saratoga. Battleship Arkansas. Submarines. Support vessels. Pennsylvania survives again, but she is heavily contaminated. Radioactive water covers her decks. Radioactive particles coat every surface. The contamination cannot be removed. Pennsylvania is towed to Kwajalein Atoll in September 1946. She is too radioactive for repairs. Leaks develop. She cannot be safely boarded for extended periods. She remains at Kwajalein for radiological and structural studies. Scientists measure radiation levels. Engineers assess structural damage. The data contributes to understanding of nuclear weapons effects on ships. On August 29, 1946, Pennsylvania is decommissioned. The flag is lowered. The crew, such as it was, disbands. She becomes a hulk, a radioactive memorial to atomic testing and 30 years of service. Pennsylvania remains at Kwajalein through 1947. Radiation levels decrease slowly. Half-life of the isotopes means years or decades before the ship is safe. Studies continue. Scientists track contamination patterns. Engineers document hull deterioration. The data is valuable, but the ship herself has no future. On February 10, 1948, the decision is made to dispose of Pennsylvania. She is too contaminated for scrapping in normal shipyards. Workers cannot safely cut apart a radioactive hull. The solution is to sink her at sea far from inhabited areas. Tugs tow Pennsylvania from Kwajalein to a position approximately 40 nautical miles southwest of Kwajalein Atoll. On February 10, 1948, scuttling charges are placed. The charges detonate. Water floods the hull. Pennsylvania settles slowly. She goes down stern first. The torpedo damage from Okinawa, ensuring that the stern floods faster than the bow. At 1300 hours, she slips beneath the surface. Depth at the scuttling site, approximately 15,000 feet. Pennsylvania takes with her the distinction of being the last ship torpedoed in World War II. The torpedo that hit her on August 12, 1945 struck 3 days after the Soviets entered the war and 3 days before Japan announced surrender. It was the final torpedo launched by Japanese forces that found its mark on a major warship. After all the battles, all the bombardments, all the near misses, Pennsylvania was hit when the war was effectively over. The statistics define her service: 30 years commissioned, 2 world wars. She was commissioned October 25, 1916. She was decommissioned August 29, 1946. She participated in more Pacific amphibious operations than any other battleship. Attu, Makin, Kwajalein, Eniwetok, Saipan, Guam, Peleliu, Leyte, Lingayen, Okinawa. She bombarded Wake Island on the way to her final posting. She survived Pearl Harbor by accident of position. She survived Leyte Gulf without firing. She survived kamikaze attacks. She survived the atomic bomb, twice. The ammunition expenditure tells part of the story. Exact figures were never compiled in a single comprehensive report, but estimates based on action reports and ammunition consumption logs suggest Pennsylvania fired more naval gunfire support rounds than any battleship in the Pacific. Conservative estimates exceed 5,000 rounds of 14-inch ammunition. Secondary battery expenditure likely exceeded 20,000 rounds of 5-inch. The exact totals are lost in incomplete records, but the pattern is clear. Pennsylvania fired and fired and fired. The bombardment role defined her war. She was supposed to be a battleship, designed to fight other battleships, to engage in fleet actions, to close with enemy capital ships and destroy them with main battery fire. She fired her main battery in anger exactly once at surface targets in a fleet action, the Battle of Surigao Strait, and she never got the order to commence firing. Everything else was shore bombardment, concrete fortifications, pillboxes, gun emplacements, troop concentrations, tank formations, supply depots, anything the Marines or Army needed destroyed before they went ashore or while they advanced inland. Pennsylvania provided day after day, island after island, campaign after campaign. The crew became specialists. Shore fire control became an art form. Spotting aircraft reported fall of shot. Shore fire control parties radioed corrections. Fire control calculated solutions. Guns fired. The cycle repeated. Hundreds of times, thousands of times. The crew could execute the cycle in their sleep. Some of them did. Sleep deprivation during extended bombardments meant men worked automatons. Load. Aim. Fire. Load. Aim. Fire. The guns wore out. Barrels were replaced. The replacements wore out. Those barrels were replaced. The cycle continued. Oklahoma's guns. Guns from battleships that would never fire again. Mounted on Pennsylvania. Fired until they wore out. Replaced again. The ship consumed gun barrels like ammunition. The nickname Old Falling Apart was affectionate. The crew understood what it meant. Their ship was being worked to destruction. Constant firing. Constant operations. Minimal time for maintenance. The ship held together through skill and determination, and the fact that American industrial capacity could provide whatever parts were needed. If something broke, it got fixed. If something wore out, it got replaced. The ship kept fighting. But there was pride in the nickname too. Pennsylvania fell apart because she was doing her job. She was not sitting in port looking pretty. She was not avoiding combat. She was firing everything she had at every target she could reach. The ship was falling apart from overwork. That was something to be proud of. The contrast with her status in 1941 is stark. Flagship of the United States Fleet. The ship that embodied American naval power in the Pacific. Admirals flew their flags from Pennsylvania. Ceremonies were held on her decks. She was beautiful, impressive, the symbol of American strength. Then Pearl Harbor, dry dock number 1. The bombs, the fires, the destroyers exploding, the torpedo tube landing on her bow. 15 dead, 14 missing, 38 wounded. The executive officer dead, the flagship damaged while sitting helpless in dry dock. The symbolism was brutal. The flagship of the Pacific Fleet, the ship that should have led the counterattack, was out of action getting repaired when the war started. The Japanese did not even prioritize her. She was in dry dock. She was inaccessible to torpedoes. She was a secondary target. The bombs that hit her were almost accidental. The attackers were focusing on Battleship Row. Pennsylvania just happened to be close enough to catch some of the overflow. That could have defined her war. The flagship that missed the fight. The ship that survived Pearl Harbor by being in the wrong place. The vessel that became a symbol of American unpreparedness. Instead, she became the bombardment specialist, the ship that was at every landing, the vessel that fired more rounds than any other, the battleship that personified the American approach to amphibious warfare. Overwhelming firepower applied continuously until resistance collapsed. The transformation required acceptance. Pennsylvania would never be the fleet flagship again. She would never lead the battle line. She would never engage enemy battleships in the decisive surface action that pre-war doctrine predicted. She was too slow, too old, too obsolete for fleet actions. But she could bombard, and bombardment mattered. Every Marine who landed under Pennsylvania's covering fire understood that. Every soldier who called for naval gunfire support and watched 14-inch shells obliterate the target understood that. The men on the beach did not care that Pennsylvania was too slow for fleet actions. They cared that she was offshore putting steel on target when they needed it. The Battle of Surigao Strait was the anomaly. Pennsylvania was present at the last battle between battleships. She was in the line. She was ready. Her crew was ready. And she never fired because her radar was obsolete. The ships with modern fire control engaged at 20,000 yards plus in total darkness. Pennsylvania could not acquire targets at that range. By the time her radar could lock on, the enemy was already destroyed. The lesson was humiliating. Even in the one fleet action where Pennsylvania could have participated, her obsolescence prevented her from contributing. The radar that was adequate for shore bombardment was useless in a night surface engagement against maneuvering targets. But the humiliation was private, confined to the crew. The official records note that Pennsylvania was present at Surigao Strait. That is enough. The fact that she never fired is a footnote. The battle was won. The Japanese force was annihilated. Pennsylvania's contribution was her presence, the psychological weight of 6 battleships crossing the T, the knowledge that if any Japanese ship survived the radar-directed fire from the leading battleships. Pennsylvania and Mississippi were waiting behind with optical rangefinders and shells. After Surigao, Pennsylvania went back to what she did best: shore bombardment. Lingayen Gulf. Call fire missions. Tank formations destroyed. Infantry supported. The war she was fighting did not require fleet actions. It required sustained, accurate, overwhelming fire support for amphibious operations. Pennsylvania provided. The torpedo at Okinawa was the final insult. August 12, 1945. The war effectively over. Japan broadcasting peace feelers. The Emperor preparing to surrender. 1 Japanese pilot. 1 torpedo. 1 last mission. The torpedo finds Pennsylvania in Buckner Bay. 20 men dead. The stern nearly destroyed. The ship saved by damage control and quick action and sheer determination not to sink after surviving everything else the war threw at her. Being the last ship torpedoed is a distinction nobody wants. It means you were unlucky enough to get hit when everyone else had stopped getting hit. It means the war was over, but you were still bleeding. It means you survived Lady Gulf and kamikazes and atomic bombs only to be crippled when victory was 3 days away. Pennsylvania made it home. Barely. 1 propeller. Constant pumping. Escorted across the Pacific like a cripple being helped to safety. She reached Puget Sound. The war was over, and so was she. Operation Crossroads was the epilogue. 2 atomic bombs, the most powerful weapons ever created, tested against a fleet of ships that represented the previous generation of warfare. Pennsylvania survived both blasts. She was too tough to sink, or too stubborn, or too contaminated with radiation to be safely scrapped, so they left her afloat as long as possible to study the effects. Then they scuttled her. 40 miles from Kwajalein, 15,000 feet of water. The flagship of the Pacific Fleet, the bombardment specialist, the ship that fired more rounds than any other. Old falling apart. She went down stern first, the torpedo damage ensuring she sank the same way she nearly sank at Okinawa. There is no memorial, no preserved artifact. Pennsylvania exists in photographs and documents and the memories of men who served aboard her. The National Archives hold her deck logs. The Naval History and Heritage Command maintains files. Researchers can find her action reports, her gunnery records, her damage assessments. But there is no ship to visit. No museum where people can walk her decks and see the guns and understand what she did. She is radioactive debris on the ocean floor, scattered across 15,000 feet of depth, contaminated with isotopes that will remain dangerous for generations. She cannot be raised. She cannot be salvaged. She sits in darkness at the bottom of the Pacific, where she will remain until the metal corrodes away entirely. The irony is profound. Pennsylvania survived Pearl Harbor by being in dry dock. She survived the entire war by being too slow for fleet actions. She survived atomic bombs by being positioned in the outer target ring. And she ended her existence scattered on the ocean floor because the radiation from surviving the atomic bombs made her too dangerous to bring back to civilization. The question remains, what was USS Pennsylvania? Flagship. Bombardment specialist. Survivor. Victim. Symbol of American unpreparedness at Pearl Harbor, or symbol of American industrial might and determination. The ship that missed the attack, or the ship that was at every landing. Old falling apart, or the most consistent shore bombardment platform in the Pacific. The answer is all of these things simultaneously. Pennsylvania was whatever the war required her to be at any given moment. When she needed to be a flagship for ceremonies, she was a flagship. When she needed to be a bombardment ship, she was a bombardment ship. When she needed to survive atomic bombs, she survived atomic bombs. Her legacy is not dramatic. She did not win a decisive battle. She did not sink enemy capital ships. She did not lead the fleet to victory. She fired at islands, at fortifications, at positions marked on maps by shorefire control parties. She put shells on target. She supported infantry. She did the unglamorous work that amphibious warfare required. But that work mattered. Every island taken in the Pacific required naval gunfire support. Every beach needed preparation. Every fortification needed destruction. Pennsylvania provided that support more consistently and more effectively than any other battleship in the fleet. She was reliable. She was accurate. She was always there. The crew understood this. They did not need dramatic battles to know their contribution was valuable. They saw the results every time they bombarded. Fortifications destroyed. Resistance reduced. American casualties prevented because the Marines landed on beaches that had been thoroughly worked over by 14-inch shells. The nickname Old Falling Apart captured the essential truth. Pennsylvania was worked harder than any battleship should be worked. She fired more ammunition than her designers ever imagined. She operated continuously with minimal maintenance. She held together through determination and skill and American logistics. And when she could not hold together anymore, when the torpedo and the atomic bombs and the radiation finally made her unusable, she was scuttled and forgotten. That is the fate of workhorses. They are not remembered for being beautiful or impressive or symbolic. They are remembered, if they are remembered at all, for doing their job. Pennsylvania did her job. For 30 years, through 2 world wars, through Pearl Harbor and Surigao Strait and Okinawa and Bikini, she fired her guns until the barrels wore out. She replaced the barrels and fired again. She kept firing until there was nothing left to fire at and nothing left to fire with. Then she sank, stern first, in 15,000 feet of water, 40 miles from Kwajalein. The last torpedoed ship of World War II, the bombardment specialist, the ghost in the dry dock that the Japanese missed, Old Falling Apart, the flagship that became a workhorse and died doing her job. That is enough.